Hi, welcome back, and thanks for joining us as we enter our 18th consecutive ever-deepening journey to source life through the source code, the missing code, into the source science that taps the matrix of the code, the long emerging code across the planet in our great teachings. And I just wanted to preface this opening guided meditation to think about this is the 18th session, and we should not think of from 1 to 18 as a separate segmented, broken segment. It's a continuum, a flow. Because these meditations are speaking from source code, the unum code that is unbreachable. We can't fragment it. And so my speech, if it's going to be authentic, has to be speaking from the source as we guide into the source, which has been the heritage of our great wisdom teachers across the planet. All of our wisdom teachings and enlightenment teachings and scriptures are all seeking to open portals to the source, the missing source code. And I know that we humans, where we are, have, in terms of limited attention span, and there are some who believe that 20 minutes enough, we have to take a break. And I'm going on in these guided meditations, sometimes an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. Even though my aim is to go for about 15 minutes, I get carried away, and to make the guided tour to go deeper every time without breaking the continuum. It takes time. So please, if you get tired after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, we're giving so much in this journey that it can overload you. I'm sensitive to that. So if you feel overloaded, hit the pause. At any time, take a break and come back. You're controlling the level of exposure, if the dosage of the source, and it is a dose. I mean, if we're going to go into the source voltage, it is huge, and I know that we have to be prepared and develop our capacity to handle it. So this is just a commentary on our journey and some advice after years of teaching. And when I go into the classroom at the college in my 50th year of teaching, and these young, beautiful, brilliant students who have limited mind attention span, and to have an hour and a half class, and to keep the voltage focused and keep the attention span, and invite the students to stay in the zone. It's difficult. So you control the pause, and take a break and breathe it, and overnight come back. And because this journey to source and the high voltage of leaving the dominant matrix or code that is so deep we can't see it. It's such a deep implant in our evolutionary journey that makes it possible to have a culture and a life and use language cannot be seen. It's invisible. We have a blind spot. Our vision creates a blind spot. And what we're doing is stepping back on the shoulders of our great traditions and geniuses and pioneers through the ages to get their help and to open up a new way to access and sustain being in the source. And so the single bracket, double bracket notation that's behind me that we've been using in our meditation visual is a breakthrough. And we haven't had it articulated clearly before, so we keep seeing the source word and the everyday code in the same space. It's been conflated. And if it's conflated, we default to the smother board. And it swallows the words from the higher source, and we lose it. We lose the medicine of the Buddhas and the Krishnas and the great, the Jesus and Buddha and Moses, Lao Tzu, who are speaking from the source. We can't get the medicine because we desource it, because of the dominance of the deep implant, program, mind operating system, matrix, whatever the covenants that we're working with, the codes. And so take a break, pause, you follow your own rhythm and take a break. And please realize that in terms of the dialogue art, I'm keenly tuned in to the receptivity of the audience and the listeners and the viewers and the participants in this meditation, that we can get knocked out and we need a break. So please orchestrate yourself. I understand that. That's what's good about this. You could hit the pause button and take a break or run away completely and never come back. I hope you will stay on this ultimate greatest story never told, because we couldn't see the code. We didn't get the code fully. And the global drama is enormous. And to stay with that is a life changer. Because the deeper we go into this, of 14, 15, 16, 17, and now we go to 18, the 18th session, These are not broken, these are continuous in my mind. It's a continuum, and it has to be. So these are not separable segments, but a constant marathon, holothon flow. And I'm mindful of that. So I'm thinking back to number 1, number 4, number 10, number 16, number 15, constantly as we go deeper. And as we go down to 18, 19, 20, and beyond, I'm not setting a limit, because as my own discovery in sharing this journey to Source, this guided meditation, is that it gets deeper. The more I go, the deeper it gets. So we said at the end of last meeting that this time we're going to try and understand the human condition from the Source lens, from the global lens, the double bracket space, the unum science, the Source science, and the medical ontology. We have to look into the human condition and see a vast range of named pathologies, the brilliance of psychiatry and psychotherapy and cultural critique of our cultural problems and issues, and sexism and racism, homophobia, and all of these, and terrorism and extreme ideology. All of these have been named, and we're trying to understand misogyny, misology, phobias, addictions, opioids, suicidal tendencies, on and on, the vast range of human dysfunctions and pathologies in different fields have been named, and they're local and scattered. Imagine that they're all coming from a common source. That's really the focus of this meditation. To both pick up and remember the major strands that have emerged for us that are unprecedented. They have not been narrated this way before, I dare to say. The single bracket, double bracket clarification of the two levels of language and reason and thought and interpretation and culture making between the single bracket I-it, way of being a human, and it's a matrix, a code, a covenant. It's a stage of rational development, word power. But then the double bracket opens up a deeper word power, a deeper reason, a deeper logos, to get that code of logos, Sophia, that our great geniuses were pioneering for us to cross, to make the crossing from the single bracket to the double bracket. So the double bracket makes it now impossible to continue to stay in the single bracket, and we didn't even know we had a single bracket space, the matrix. So the double bracket I-thou matrix calls out, exposes, and makes unforgettable the I-it matrix of the single bracket space. Another caution at the beginning as we go deeper, and I know this must be hitting you, that I seem to be repeating words. And I have my go-to words and I keep coming back to them. Please be patient with me, because double bracket code, if I'm speaking and seeking to make this the new norm, to think in double bracket technology of word power, that every word in the single bracket space has to be rekindled, renovated, resurrected into the double bracket. Time, time. Reason, reason. I am. God, God. Democracy, democracy. Pathology, pathology. Every word. Space, space. Time, time. Every word spoken in the deep thought space of the single bracket matrix or code or covenant or language form or technology. It's a technology of mind. It's a mind operating process. Every word has a double entendre. And as we enter the journey never told, because we can't tell this story, the missing stories, we can't tell it in the usual narrative space that we're familiar with. Any story, Gospels, the story of Buddha, the story of yoga, the story of science, whatever the story of the American Revolution and where we are, whatever story. The narratives we know, and we can change our story in this single bracket matrix, it has boundless possibilities of new stories and changes. Because it's a code, the single bracket matrix is not just one code, it's a code of codes. Ad infinitum, we could keep changing within that code. It can give us multiple codes, but it's not the source code. So please bear with me that I am mindful that I may sound repetitious, but how many billions and millions of times in our lifetimes are we using the single bracket repetition of our words that we use day and night, that we know, that our generations have been passing down for centuries and millennia. Those words are coined and well-worn coins. And we're imprinted with those words that we inherit in our culture and pass on to our children in our education institutions and parenting. But how do we get a new word to be recoined? I'm seeking to renovate and rectify the downloaded words that have lost their luster and their voltage, and to give them voltage again. Jesus, Jesus. Buddha, Buddha. Yoga, yoga. Every word. So I'm aware of that, and if I seem to repeat myself, it's not a mere naive repetition, it's a conscious fractal, because double bracket code is fractal. It means every point is infinitely connected. So to keep repeating the double language in the very narrative of revealing meditatively, as we are in the guided meditation, a meditation is not a predication, it's not talking about it, it's attempting to activate and institutionalize a deeper source code of our great teachers and traditions. So bear with me, please, and forgive me. Give me a little room to operate, and don't be distracted if I seem to repeat myself, because I'm seeking to rectify words that have been broken off from the source. And it's a fatal situation to really renovate them and resurrect them by speaking them anew in the Continuum, the Unam Sophia Logos code. So much for just acclimation to the journey we're on, and some of the possible distractors. Take a pause and realize that if we're trying to institutionalize a missing voltage of a deeper source power of word, and all of our words that we're used to, we have to almost deconstruct them to let them go, to hear them in a new light. So when I hear the word now in a double bracket space, wow, that now is filled with all words, all times, past, present, future. Isn't that now? Single bracket now is not the same as double bracket now, for example. And that's for every word. So we're seeking to renovate and resurrect the missing language, the risen language, where we belong as logo sapiens, not ego sapiens, or homo sapiens, or logo sapiens. So I'm conscious that this journey is a journey into the activation of the missing language, and to let it get a ring of newness. And please, when you're not on the journey, spend your time experimenting with every word, single bracket, double bracket, to learn how to restate it and upscript the deeper missing grammar of Logos Sophia. So where are we? What have we done with this picture? And again, I've suggested that this meditative hologram, it's not information, because information is here in this space. This is the information box. And here's where we are. This is the screen of our everyday culture. And we saw that this line marks something that we had not seen clearly before. That's the matrix that makes our everyday life possible, and culture, and reason, and vision, and experience, and feelings. And everything is going on here. Every sentence we utter, you know, whether it's say rain is falling, right? I'm an American. I'm French. I'm Chinese. Whatever the sentence in whatever language. If I'm speaking in the Chinese, not the English, in the French, German, Swahili, Urdu, Navajo, whatever the language. It is happening here, and the different codes of our human languages are all generated from a deep coder. And this is very important, that the stage of human development, how many eons did it take? And that's what these lines represent. We've evolved to this. And the information box of having information in the age of Google and digital technology, all here. And this line is huge, because when we have this, and we're going to go deeper as we go into 19, 20, 21, as we'll see, we're going to step back and say, I want to know what more about this. Tell me more about this matrix that we're calling a motherboard. That's a smotherboard, because it cuts us off from the mother source, the infinite source code of Logos Sophia, the infinite interconnectivity of the I-Thou, when the I and the other are woven together unbreachable, whereas the I and the other are broken here into an I-It and to I-Thou. The I-Thou is an intimate link. And so what we're seeing here is that this picture is something that we have not seen before. That this double bracket is the infinite word, the Logos word, whatever name we use, Yahweh, Allah, Brahman, Om, Buddha nature, Tao, whatever name we use for the infinite, they're all interconnected because we've seen, and this I'll repeat, here I'm repeating myself, because it's never been seen clearly. That we can't, whatever is on the ground floor of reality, reality itself or being, whatever is first, in what is given to us, the reality, the field of reality, we cannot draw a boundary around it. Because if we do, we will make it finite. The infinite cannot be placed in this space, because we will cut it off from the open. The infinite cannot be boxed or contained or boundary. It's boundless. It's not finite, it's transfinite. Infinite is transfinite, and there's no boundary. And once we realize reality is transfinite and infinite, it cannot be multiplied and broken apart. Pause and think about that, because that's the game changer. That's why I use the word unum. The unum, the infinite is infinitely unum. Not just unum, but not here, but infinitely unum. I'm repeating myself. It's just echoed all the way through from 1, 2, 3, all the way to now to 18. The infinite is unum, infinitely. That means all possibilities are united in the infinite unum. And that right now says that Yahweh, Allah, Tao, Brahman, whatever name for the infinite, they've got to be connected. Is there plurality and multiplicity? Yes, boundless. Infinite unum is infinitely plural, but yet connected. And that is the unum pluribus. That means all possible words, stories, narratives, perspectives, ideologies, lenses, scriptures, names for God, or names for the infinite, or the divine, or for nature. All names, all stories, all narratives are being sourced by the infinite unum. That has not been seen clearly. So the double parentheses surrounding the whole matrix of the possibility of reality, this is being, this is word, this is consciousness, this is energy, this is whatever, love, this is goodness, whatever name you use, they're infinitely unum connected. So we need an unum calculus to handle it, an unum pluribus calculus, language, code, the unum code. And we've suggested that if you look at the great breakthrough from Buddha's enlightenment, and as a medical diagnostician looking at the suffering of the human condition, and bringing through unprecedented unum science, Buddha science, to help us break the cycle. Or we look at the journey from Abraham, courageous, letting go of Isaac, God first, Yahweh first in all things. First is first. We can't privilege our story over the first. That's a huge moment for humanity. The father of all nations, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, something is driving it, Muhammad, all the way through the ages. All of our Christian mystics, for example, and from the Catholic to the Protestant, all the way to the Quakers, who are saying this Christ within us. We have direct access to source. That theme has been haunting us. Buddha, we have direct access to Buddha nature. We are Buddhas, all of us, right? We're Buddha sapiens, right? There's some common theme that we see driving our great traditions. From Socrates, with Plato and Aristotle, the founding of the Greek traditions, is that when Socrates saw that his culture was still in sophistry and not getting the logos, we're not getting the science, and we should know thyself above all else. And he saw that I don't have the answers, but I know this is not it. And, he got hemlock for calling out the culture as a gadfly, as a provocateur, as a heroic moment, calling us to the self-knowledge, to go to the logos, right? And he says, I'm not there, but I know this is not it. He was considered the wisest of humans in that context. And if you follow the trail from Socrates all the way through the European magnificent tradition, all through the ages, it's amazing, the story. Something is moving it that keeps it going and driving it to where we are in the 21st century. Geniuses from Kant to Hegel to Nietzsche to Husserl to Sartre to Heidegger, Jacques Derrida, for example. That's just one line. We could go to Wittgenstein, Russell, Whitehead, and into the amazing developments of mathematical logic and analytical thinking in philosophy, in the Anglo-American drama coming out of this tradition. from Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant. What's going on? Something is moving it. So whether we follow the Buddha trail or the Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad trail, or all the way to Rumi, where Rumi is beginning to see into the source and seeing, I'll meet you in that field, in that space, beyond judgment and right and wrong, in the box. Come and meet me in the field, the Rumi space. That echoes across. We have direct access to one another in the deep field. Why? Because the science is that we're all interconnected. Why? Because when you go into the infinite unum, everything is interconnected. You can't break it apart. Space and time, space-time. Mind and body, mind-body. I and thou, I-thou. Me and nature, I and nature. Mind and word, mind-word. Word and world, word-world. So the infinite interconnectivity, when we say all things are interconnected in this language, is not the same as speaking it in the smother board that is working with a calculus that divides. We're going to spend a session going into that soon. But what is it about the single bracket technology of consciousness that divides and separates everything it touches? It slashes and it cuts us. This generates that. It's the same thing. The single bracket matrix cuts us from source and creates a technology that we can get information and narratives and stories and belief systems and paradigms, and we can change them and move them. And think about it. All of our human languages, so far that we can inventory across the planet and through the ages, they're all codes. French has a code. It's a grammar. German has a code. Chinese has a code. Sanskrit, Hebrew, Arabic, Swahili. Whatever it is, it has a code. And they're different. And they give different conventions. But they're all coming out of a deep coder. So the technology of this word processing, which cuts us off from source unbeknownst to us, because we're living in here. We're living in our mind space. This is the screen of our consciousness. Everyday common sense is here. And the thinker and the objects that appear to us as information is in here. And this cuts us from access to source. And our great teachers who are tapping the infinite interconnectivity, like Buddha, for example, has to find a way to teach this code and this matrix, the source matrix, from this smotherboard matrix to see this is why we're suffering here. To live here under the colonized tyranny of a technology of consciousness that cuts us off, creates a condition, a human condition of samsara, trapped in the space and repeating life after life, culture after culture, repeating in the space of samsara. Or the biblical sin, the sin term. What is sin? Sin can be represented in this deep science as being cut off from the source. To be born in sin is to be born into the single brackets. To be born in sin is to be born into the single brackets. I didn't choose it. I'm just brought into a culture that's speaking a language and using a code that's just passed on generation after generation across cultures. It's equal opportunity. And we're all using it. And our great teachers are saying, enough, stop it. It's a meltdown. Our worlds are in battles, and you begin to see the vast symptoms of dysfunctions that have been seen and named in this space. So what I'm suggesting in this meditation is something that's has not been done this way before and seen this way. I'm trying to look from double bracket source space medically from here into this human condition. Here is the human condition. Let's say 3,000 years, just to pick an arbitrary. This has been going on for eons, but we have been using pre-critically a technology that's so deeply implanted that allows us to have a culture and meaning and word and reason and life and beliefs and intelligence. It gives us vision. This gives us vision to see the information here. But we can't see it from in here. We can't see, we here on the screen can't see the vision we have here, cannot give us the source vision in order to see the human condition here. And our great teachers are able to somehow step back into the deeper space. So when Buddha is enlightened here and sees the human condition, he tries to give the Four Noble Truths. So what we're working through in this meditation and keeping all the 17 prior sessions together is that there is a smotherboard, there's a motherboard, it cuts us off. We're desourced. If you're desourced, you're going to suffer. Let me get the science. I want to know why. Why when you're desourced? Whatever your culture, whatever your religion, whatever your science, whatever you are, if you're in a desourced technology, you're going to be suffering. Why? Because you're cut off from life, from being, from word, from truth, from a life force. And if your being is broken, this breaks you. If your being is broken, that's serious. So source science is deep ontology. Ontology is a science of being. And if your being is broken, then you have a medical condition. And the medical ontology has not been developed. So source medicine is a new vocabulary because it's saying that there are ontological disorders. If your being is broken or you're alienated from being, from reality, from source, from self, because your self is sourcing too, but if you're cut off from yourself, you're broken. If your being is broken, you're going to see symptoms. If source is the deepest force calling us and we can't get there, we're going to be showing symptoms of the blockage of access to source. We don't have to say God, to reality, right? To being, to the primary word, to knowledge, to truth, to meaning. It's here. If we're cut off, if this is the human condition, we've got to face it. And that's what our great traditions are showing. So one of the points that we're holding for the last 17 meditations is the infinite force. Whatever name we use, we're using Logos Sophia provisionally from the Greek, Logos Sophia, the infinite light of reason, the infinite light of being, the infinite word, language, thought, truth, meaning, ethics, all here. Interconnected. I, thou, I, it, I, thou. So we've seen that. So this force is operating in every point, always. That's part of the infinite unum. We can't displace it. We can't push it away. We've seen that in our earlier journey. And our great theologians knew that in some way. The infinite can't be over there. We can't make it transcendent. It's immanent. It's in every iota of life. That's the infinite. You can't push the infinite away. It's in every grain of sand. It's in every cell. It's in every pulse of every electron, every pulse of thinking, every thought, every feeling, every perception, every percept, whatever we see, it's there. It pervades us, the infinite, and yet we can't see it. The great geniuses begin to see that. And in that sense, just to be alive, if we only could know it, being alive here, right? The infinite is here too. It's not just up here, it's everywhere. And the force is making every possible thought, belief, narrative, worldview couldn't be without the source. That's an axiom of source science. Source, infinite source is source all, sourcing all possibilities all the time. And also infinitely here now all the time. And we can't access it. And since it's calling us to our home, because we humans are logos sapiens, we're source sapiens, and if we're cut off and can't get home to who we are, to our high self, we're going to feel it, and the symptoms are going to show up in our everyday cultural space here. So here's something that is really stunning to say, and I'm going to say it, is that it's not, if you're living in this cultural space, then the culture itself is a virus. If you're using a desourced cultural technology or code or matrix, whatever name we use for that technology of consciousness that generates our language, our meaning, our thought, our experience, we couldn't do it without it, then our culture wholesale has an infection. It's using a code, a matrix, that is a virus, an ontological virus, that has not been named adequately. We need to call it out because it's going to infect every aspect of our lives. Wherever we turn, we're going to feel it. And what I'm doing with you in this meditation is daring to say the pathologies we see in our human condition, this picture of our human condition, cannot be just looked at separately here with the lens we now use. If we talk about phobias, if we talk about sexism, if we talk about racism, if we talk talk about suicidal issues or addictions or opioids or terrorism or violence or whatever name we use here for human pathologies, right? When we see them in the deeper light, when we go back and see that it's being generated from our invisible, deeply implanted smotherboard. Smotherboarding is a virus. And all of our cultures and worlds and life and worldviews, as beautiful as people as we are, and we're good people, we're noble, logo sapiens, but we're trapped and colonized by a thought form, a matrix that is holding us and giving us our vision and our beliefs and our experiences. And that's beautiful and meaning, but it's systemically fragmenting and severed from source. And that is what the great geniuses are saying. That's the medical problem. The medical problem, when seen from the source, as Buddha, is to exist is to suffer. Existence is in this place. Existence is here. Existence is under the sway of the samsara-producing motherboard. It creates our illness, ontological illness. And we need a language for ontological virus, ontological infection, ontological pathologies. So culture itself can be dysfunctional. Not only the local symptoms that show up within the culture, but the culture itself. A society itself can be infected. I know that's harsh to bring out, but that is what, say, the language of sin is saying. If you're born in sin, then everything that's going on there is cut off from grace. And it's not that most of our life is great and doing well. It's that all of our life in the sin zone or the samsara zone is going to be infected. That's why Jesus will die for the sins of humanity, take them on. What is that? Well, when we see that the sin is being trapped in a thought form that is keeping us cut off from Christ, from connection with God, from the gracious sacred life of who we are, then to die for this is to help us cross over into the awakened Christ space. So that when we look with source eyes and say the greatest call of humanity is a call to source. And so if we look at these local symptoms here, you can see that social pathologies like sexism and racism and homophobia and slashing one another in violence and ideological violence at that level. I mean, you look into the human psyche and you see a person who is distracted and broken. I don't feel together. I don't have integrity. I have multiple sides of multiple personae, and I got mood swings that are going on, and I feel an emptiness in my life, and I'm looking for love in all the wrong places because love is here. If you're looking for love here, you're not going to find deep love, real love. If you're looking for meaning, you're not going to find it here. You're going to have artificial meaning. Why? Because every word is like a Lego piece. That's the technology. It gives pieces. It gets bits and pieces. Why? Because the law of identity, is a great law. It gives you a way to name and tag everything in your world, space and time and cause and substance and relations and whatever word we use, it's a name tag. And this technology gives us powerful name tags to have information bytes, and we can put sentences together and say Socrates is wise, or whatever the sentence it may be. I'm a woman, whatever the sentence may be, I can connect, grass is green, right, and make sentences and put the pieces together. But it's artificial, like putting Legos together. And we get meaning, but meaning here is artificially synthesized by us in putting the pieces together with the laws of the game that we play to make sentences. And what we do in one culture and language, we don't do in the other language. We put them things together differently in the conventions of different cultures. So somehow this motherboard that holds humanity here and keeps us eclipsed from the source, and to make this great crossing, we cannot do it by downloading this code into our space, which has been the main addiction and malpractice. When we hear the word of God, the word of source, the word of Buddha, the word of Krishna, Moses' laws being brought down to humanity, the voice of Jesus, for example, we bring it down into our terms because that's natural. It's forgivable. But in a way, it's inexcusable because our teachers are insisting you got to upscript. That's this arrow. Humanity has to upscript. To do that, you've got to let this go, and to let this go, it removes this barrier, and we get access into civilized higher life. Christ life, Buddha life, yoga life, Om life. So the journey of our great traditions is to upscript. We can't download. This is to download. And that in our meditation number 15 and 16, we said, here's a big problem of translating across the two different matrices, the I-it language and the I-thou language. If I try to get the I-thou language, which is when you're in the connection, you're feeling that you're one with the word. When you're I-aming, the I-aming is the living being. When you're saying I am here, I'm nodding. I am here is not I am there. Any word here in this matrix is a different language level than spoken in the source code. So how do we get source code, the I-thou language, the risen language, for us to understanding when our reason and understanding and interpretation is going on here? This is the language that dominates us. So how do we cross into the higher language? There's a translation problem that we're facing. So again, I'm suggesting that, we'll do this down the road together. I'll try to show in Buddha, let's focus on Buddha, when Buddha was enlightened. And what is enlightenment? It's entering into the Buddha space, into the awakened space of awakened consciousness. And what do you see? The infinite unum of infinite interconnectivity of I and thou, and everything is connected. How do you communicate as a Buddha, seeing this language, to people who are living in here and are going to interpret it and download it to our terms, and therefore not break the barrier to enter the Buddha space? How do we make that crossing? So Buddha's Four Noble Truths are here. They're not here. They're not bullet points. If I say here, existence is suffering, it has a cause, namely this, we're addicted to that, we have a choice. Buddha's third axiom of choice, spoken from the source medicine, is not that I can choose A or B or C. Choice here is not the same as choosing between this and this. To say I have a choice, we humans have a choice. The choice is not a choice in the box. The choice is to leave the box and go into the Buddha space. To choose the high ground. To choose the Buddha Dharma, the law, the science of Buddha. So suffering doesn't mean what we normally understand in this limited sense in our cultural narrative here. I see poverty, I see starvation, I see old age, I see dying, diseases. These are suffering. No, that's true. But there's a deeper suffering. There's suffering that comes from being in the smother board. They're pathologies of meaning. I'm meaningless. My life is empty. No matter what I do, I'm always in a midlife crisis, which means it's a crisis of meaning. Why? Because it's not meaningful. It's not mindful. I'm cut off from something. I'm not being full. My being is hurting, and I don't even want to face it. I can't name it. I don't have the language to diagnose it. So that if I say Buddha's first axiom, existence is suffering, is a call, if rightly seen, to say living in this cut-off space here, in this, is suffering. All our life and experience here, diagnostically, is in a form of suffering. Our words suffer. We don't have meaning. Our reason is discoherent. It's broken. It's not in the unum. We can't be here now. Being here now is a high technology. But to be here now is not the same axiom. So in a way, Buddha was giving an example. If we want to end the suffering which comes from here, which is a deep diagnostic medically, then we've got to do something profound to rehabilitate and come in and rise. We've got to upscript our lives and migrate our culture and lives personally and interculturally from here into here. That's just the Buddha. So, and it took centuries to get that. If you follow 2,500 years of Buddha, and the 600 years people were still staying here to try and understand the Buddha and download the Buddha teaching. And Nagarjuna, a genius, you may never have heard the name. Nagarjuna came and challenged the whole Buddha tradition and saying, you're not getting Buddha. You can't get Buddha in the box. It's not going from one to the other. It's not going from one story to another in the box. It's about leaving the box. And he attempted to show in a magnificent way that people should really tune into Nagarjuna. He tried to show that this space collapses on itself. It's not sustainable. If you're cut off from the source, from emptiness, this can't work. It was a brilliant scientific breakthrough. To say, single bracket, alleges to be self-sourcing. And our lives here, when I say I am a being, I allege to be self-sourcing. And Buddha saw that that is malpractice. It's incompetent. Because no word is self-sourcing without the source. What's that? The Buddha space, which is that absolute emptiness. Shunyata is funding every possibility. And this logic, this technology, as much as information looks as if it's independent and self-sourced, it's not self-sourced. And he showed why it would fall apart. If you cut off the single bracket from the double bracket funding, it falls apart. And Nagarjuna opened that up, and how many people understand Nagarjuna? The middle way. The Madhyamika, the way to the middle way. Beyond is or isn't. Beyond being or not being. Beyond all of the opposites. It's crossing into the Buddha language. And it took another many centuries to get that. And it travels east, through Tibet, and into China, and into Japan, and into Zen, and into the 20th century of Zen, and we're still not getting the art of being here now. And even one of the great founders of the Kyoto school, Nishida, is trying to get the logic, the science of this space, and to show the logic, the technologies, the codes we have here cannot handle the code of Buddha, the code of emptiness, of Basho in the Japanese. The logic of emptiness. And on his deathbed, even though he's a revered genius of the founder of the Kyoto School of Zen, which is the technology of being here now and showing up in the zone, in the source, he said to his colleagues, you're still not getting the logic. You're still putting it back in the box. That tendency and addiction to put it back in the box here. Teachings that come from here that we put in the box is so inveterate because, why? Because this motherboard matrix has not been seen. It's not been named and called out as we are attempting to do here in the light of all our great teachers across the planet. That was just a quick flash. I know I'm going fast, right? From Buddha, 2,500 years ago, all through the centuries, trying to get the Buddha's four great axioms, source, medical, diagnostic of enter the Buddha space and end the suffering. We can end the suffering. What suffering? The suffering from being cut off in our being from sourcing, from being mindful and flowing in the Zen flow of living in the zone. We still aren't getting it. And we could take time and go from Socrates, the genius in the Greek tradition, and follow that genius line, just driving. Something is driving forward the dialectic of the unfolding of the great philosophical minds and theologians and mystics through the ages. Mystics are seeing this is truth, but we don't have the words to express it. These are the only words we have, and therefore truth cannot be spoken. That's the mystic is almost giving in to this point of saying language is here, and we don't have the words to express that. That is truth, and truth is beyond words, so we have to be silent. At least that is recognizing half of the problem, that our everyday words cannot express truth. So the many forms of mystics is saying mystic is silent. So, and the Buddha was silent also, but the Buddha was teaching. And Jesus was silent, but Jesus was teaching. Why? Because the infinite word is not silent. The infinite word has infinite power. And when you tap the deeper power of the word here, there's a deeper speak. There's a deeper way to speak and use language. The way Buddha is using it, the way Jesus, when Jesus is speaking, in following the trail from Abraham to Moses to Jesus, what would lead for a Jesus to enter the scene? Well, the same point. If you're not getting the teaching, if you're taking the word of God here, you're still not crossing into the Christ. So who is the Christ? The one who's the Logos in the flesh, the embodied Logos. And when you're in this space, because of the Unam, you are the Word. You're one with the Word. You can't separate yourself. You have to speak it from your being. So Jesus would say weird things like, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And when that speech is heard and downloaded here, either we execute the person for saying you're one with God, or we see the magnificence of it, but it's off limit to us. We put that The Christ is the Son of God, the Son of Logos. And that's way beyond us. And we take that information and we follow the Gospels here and follow the Christ and Jesus and get the teaching here. But the point that Jesus was making is that if you get the laws of Moses in the box and write it out, here are the commands that come from this place, from God, from Yahweh. And he brings it down into the tribal culture, and you write out the codes, you still are not getting it. And so Jesus will come and say, folks, like a Nagarjuna, we're not getting it. We're still not getting it. You have to enter the Christ, and you got to die to make the crossing. That's a great axiom. All the teachers know that. If you're going to, what's dying? Letting go of the motherboard in order to come to the source motherboard. And we've got to do that. Otherwise we die in sin. We're born in sin and we die. That's one language. That's just one version. I'm not suggesting we accept sin talk or samsara talk, because I'm trying to open up a deeper ontological science, a logos talk that is not going to get into religious divinity. Not that it's bad, but we don't have to go there. There's a deeper way scientifically to see that there's a motherboard and it's cutting us off from being, the language of being, the science of ontology, which is called first philosophy. First philosophy is first science, the queen of the sciences, as Aristotle and the early Greek tradition alleged that there's a deep science of being, and if we get that, it's going to be the queen of all the sciences. And the science behind that is that first science is getting to the source, is going to be sourcing all possibilities, all ideologies and worldviews. And by the way, ideologies are happening here. Whatever your ideology, it's really a story that's coming, a belief system that's coming within this motherboard. So if we're going to stop ideology, and Buddha was stopping it, he says there is no ideology here. Ideology cannot be transported into here. So Buddha was going beyond any belief systems or information box of ideology. The end of ideology. And if we're seeing in the modern world this ideological extremism that's causing terrorism as one of the medical symptoms, what's behind that? It's not just a story here that we have to end. It's the technology that's generating any ideology, which is a belief system that takes itself to be true. And if it's true, then it should be universal. It's a truth for all people, not just my truth, because truth by its nature is calling us to truth, which is global. And so the journey into truth by all of these great geniuses is to cross from the opinion of ideology and belief systems in the box that are cut off from the word and from reason and from the light of reason. So these are just examples I'm giving. I know it takes time, but it's so important to see it if we're going to really to get a new symptomology from source science, a new medical, a new source medical, ontological medicine. I call it medical ontology. I'm suggesting that's a new, deeper science that our geniuses were opening up. Our being can be broken and have an infection, and we have ill being. If our being is ill, we have ill being, then we don't have well-being. So wellness, health of being, is crossing into the source and getting the source code, where we live and move in the mindful space of the awakened mind, where we are in ethics and compassion. So that is the journey to health, is from the place of pathologies into the place of wellness. And we don't get that because this has not been called out. So let's do, so what I'm doing, I keep going back to these examples from Socrates all the way to Heidegger, let's say. 2,500-year journey. What's driving it? The call to the source. What is Heidegger saying in his mature career after establishing Sein und Zeit, his early career? He goes, we're still not in the word. I would like us to enter the word. We're still not thinking. Those are themes. So language is the house of being. The word is the house of being. These are themes from his later work. Why did that come out 25 years after Socrates and the early Greek thinkers? What's driving it? Because there's no getting around the call of the infinite source for us to rise in our evolutionary journey from this adolescent stage of development to a mature human who is living in the Logos. So whether we look at yoga, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, I mentioned that before, follow the yoga trail from the Upanishads, from the early Hindu rishis that saw into the Brahman, into the infinite, the oneness of Brahman. And the oneness not here, but Brahman, the oneness, the unum of Brahman. Brahman is the word for the infinite. And coming through the Bhagavad Gita, which is a great epic where Arjuna is broken down here in this place. And he doesn't know it. He doesn't know about this. And Krishna, the voice of Om, begins a dialogue with Arjuna to speak and help him cross. And the technology and science of yoga is not to just meditate in the box. You can't meditate in the box. Meditation, which is what we're seeking to do in this guided meditation, is a crossing and reorientation to the deep space, the Om space, the Christ space, the Buddha space, the Muhammad Allah space, the Rumi space, the I am space, the I thou space, not the I it space. So the hologram we're seeing here with single bracket, double bracket is seeking to break through in a way we've never seen the single bracket clearly. It's been hidden and the double bracket was been implanted and conflated into the single bracket so we couldn't see it, so we always default to the single bracket. And century after century we get stuck and our teachers call us out and we keep retreating back to the default smotherboard. That's a human condition. And if you look at the situation of the human cultures here in this box, in this space of the digital Google space of information, knowledge is information, and psychology and feelings and emotions and everything we've got, our experiences are here. And it's laboring under the broken artificial Lego pieces that we put together and not getting the flow of deep flow of the unity of being by tapping the source, which is our home. And our definition and the call of the Logosophia upon us. So it's no wonder that any of the lineages, whether it's Buddha to now, or Krishna helping the yoga to understand the technology of yoga to come here. Yoga is here. Christ is here. Buddha is here. And if you go to Socrates, the Logos is here. And all of these great traditions are calling us to enter into the upscript, into the source code. So this picture that we're getting here, this cosmogram, this hologram of the infinite space that's sourcing all, we've not seen clearly before, I'm suggesting. And what we're seeking to do in this meditation is to look at the various symptoms of pathologies that we have in our culture, that we have named, to see it in a deeper light. And so let's pause a moment and let me turn the page to try and erase this. Let's erase this. Because what if we didn't see the double brackets? And therefore realize that we're always in the double brackets. We never can step outside of it. And it's always been there for eons, calling us. The infinite word is always there. The infinite source is always there. How did we get to this picture? I want to just give a kind of a time-sequenced 3,000 years fast forward of our evolution, of stages, to see how, and then we'll come back to this in a moment. So let's turn the page for a moment. Unfortunately, we find it's formatted with the infinite space. That's a fresh page in this 18th meditation. And so wherever we locate ourselves here, there's no lines here, there's no smotherboard or motherboard or anything like that. It's just, in the beginning, infinite word. And whatever appears, let there be light. And however many billions of years it takes for light to come to a point, just forget this for a minute. It's going to be almost painful to do this, but I'm going to say, forget this. Forget there's any double bracket. Forget that. Mark it off. Just let's have a blank page with no marks on it. Let's start over. And I'd like to try to give a sense of how did we get to the prior picture when we didn't have a single bracket or double bracket. Well, let's say we started with, as we began to get, after eons of evolution, we began to name things. And in the Greek tradition, it's said to be, when to think is to predicate, to have information. Subject, predicate, joined. Yes or no. I mean, make information here. And that's where we have the word. This is the word. We tapped the word. We got the word fire. It's right here. This is almost like an early stage of our human evolutionary development. We were able to tap word power. Again, we're forgetting any of this, but of course, our secret is it's there, right? We couldn't have gotten it without it, but forget that for now. So, however long, centuries, we reached a point where we had the fire. We had information. We can name things. And the beautiful law is when I name something, whatever it is, if you name it, A is A. Whatever I do, I didn't even know I have a law, but there's a law that whenever I name something, I pick it out. I give it an ID. It has an ID. It's an item. It's a unit. It's a piece. Like I. And not I. And so it begins to say, all right, we have information. Which languages? Well, we have all these languages across the planet. French and German and Hebrew and Swahili and on. All of our human languages are evolving, all using a technology. Because, as in the Greek philosophy, what is the logic? What is the code? To think is to predicate. To predicate is to join pieces and make sense. And therefore we have a thought and it can be true. So now we have meaning and truth, starting with language word power. But it doesn't take long to know when we're saying A is A, that there is a line between the I am the thinker, I am the subject, I'm consciousness using language to talk about the world. So here's a subjective psychology space, the world of ideas in my mind. And here is the word, here is signs. And there is, it points to the world, and here's the world. And those are facts. If I say snow is white, then if it's a fact in the world, I know I'm scribbling. That's the world. This is consciousness. Here is the word. So thought, language, world are separate, right? And it begins to go. And in this space, which is a technology, we don't yet have the single brackets. We just have the line now between the I and the not I. Because wherever I or we are, that the screen, the box, the screen of awareness is the subject has a thought and it's an object. It becomes an object in this box. And our signs point and picture the world, and we have facts, and I can give information. That's fantastic. And now we begin to see, wow, there's so many different stories and cultures with different ways of speaking and describing and rendering the world with many different lenses. We're now becoming lens conscious. Why? If I am using a Christ lens, it's not the same as a Buddha lens, not the same as a yoga lens, not the same as a Tao, Chinese lens, African lens, whatever the lens may be. So now we're going to see the lenses that gives us different worlds and different cultures. And again, the same principle, this culture is a different one as we have different worlds apart. And this is the space of reason. And then we begin to see at the next stage, wait a minute, where the great teacher is calling out the infinite space, there's Yahweh, there is Buddha, there is the Logos tradition, there is the yoga tradition. They're calling us to rise, and that begins to become aware, oh, check it out, there is a blockage. Now we've got the knowledge from the light of these great teachers calling out for us to rise. We become aware that there is a motherboard here. Sin, samsara, unbeing, cross off. Now this has come into the picture. And now the question is, how do we cross from here into the alleged, and now, with single brackets, double brackets begins. And when we have a double bracket, it's infinite. And if it's infinite, then here we are. We're surrounded by the infinite. It was always here, and we couldn't have even started without it. It was there from the beginning. And so we begin to say, okay, our human evolutionary journey, stages of development, the I and the object, the thought and the facts, and pointing out there to the world, and words are signs that point. But how about words that reveal? And so we're hearing these great teachers and scriptures speak, and we download them here into our... So our great translators, our visionaries, are translating and downloading to us, to our language, so we can get it. And the great teachers are saying, no, you can't download, you've got to upscript if you're going to break out of a barrier. And now we become aware of the barrier, and there's this motherboard. And you realize all of these different cultures and languages and forms are all sharing a code. We couldn't have seen it. We're going global now. We're getting to a deeper space. And so that's, now you begin to become aware, there's an infinite source holding us all the time, and we couldn't breathe, and we couldn't have any word without it. It's sourcing all. There's a source all. There's a unum principle. That's the game changer. Centuries in evolution. So it's important to see that when we have a picture like this, it is not a new overnight thing. It's been a deep struggle to arise and arrive here. So I think it's important to just remember how we got to this and why this is so radical and global in power and scope and capturing the wisdom. This cosmogram is seeking to capture the highest wisdom of the planet. And even then, we didn't have the single bracket, double bracket, and we're opening it up now to say, wow, that is our human condition. This is the picture of our human condition. We're here, and this is causing us, as great as it is, to give us information. It is not really deep information. And as much as I am here in my world and belief system, I'm not yet in the zone. I'm not yet in my being. I didn't come home to being. Whether I'm using the Christ language, the Moses language, the Muhammad language, the Krishna language, or the science language. Because, of course, science, too, is using this code to develop the narrative where there is Ptolemy, Copernicus, Newton, Einstein, Hawking. We're evolving. What are we beginning to see in theoretical physics? Einstein seeking the grand unified field, to know that the different branches of physics must be unified. Why? Because the unum is calling. So the drive is happening everywhere we turn. It's happening in science. Science wants to get to the unified field. And if Einstein is trying to find the unified field here and not calling this out because it wasn't clear, then you're not going to find the unified field. So if light behaves like wave or particle, light is both wave, but it can't be because the logic is saying either one or the other. S cannot be both P and not P. It's either P or not P. So wave cannot be light and wave and particle because it's a contradiction. A contradiction is impossible because contradictions, polarities, have to be rejected. So the quest for the unified field of physics is a quest to cross into the deep physics of the source, science. And physics, theoretical physics, is astrophysics, the Big Bang. If you say the Big Bang in the beginning is Big Bang and you're doing it here, it's not the Big Bang of let there be light. So really, it's almost a scientific cosmology is not deep ontology. And the non-locality of the universe is here. The butterfly effect, where everything is interconnected causally, is here. The fractal causation of intercausality is here. You need this technology and science to get non-locality and superluminary, and to get the link between consciousness and energy that you can't get here because it keeps dividing. Heisenberg, the mind of the physicist of the experiment is part of the experiment. You can't sever consciousness from what is observed. But when you go into the deep field of deep physics, then you begin to see the unified field. So in other words, whether it's physics or politics, 1776, we went over this before. If the visionaries are seeing that as long as there's a code, the opening of 1776, here's an experiment. If you put 1776, the founding declaration of the American way, here in the double bracket visionary, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're all endowed by the source with unalienable rights to life, liberty, freedom. And then it's called that if there's any convention, any political band that brings us together that violates our humanity and dignity, it's our duty to separate. If we read that 1776, that the call to separate not from the British and the monarchy, but to separate from the smotherboard that's violating our dignity and humanity and freedom. We're colonized in a deeper way than we thought. And even these visionaries of 1776 may not have been aware that they're calling up this motherboard to, we've got to separate. So the Declaration of Independence is we've got to become independent of any thought form or matrix or code or convention or covenant or political band that brings us together in a culture that we are. We've got to call it out and separate to find our dignity and find our path to the high space, the high ground. This is huge. So that quick experiment is again to go deepen and get us used to thinking any event or development that we have in our history, there's a deeper ontological way of understanding the call of the force. We're always, wherever we are, we're living under the influence of the infinite force. And it's operating, and we can understand that history, that missing story, never told. You can't tell this story that we're speaking. Our journey cannot be told here. It cannot be spoken here. It's got to be spoken here, in this deeper space. That's the greatest story, moving human evolution, that cannot be told. It's ever told, but it's never told. And we're seeking to make it manifest in this guided meditation, to feel it, to experience it, to listen to our geniuses, our great scriptures and traditions, and wow, they're calling out something deep that we haven't really named and seen, which we're calling it now. We're calling it out, this motherboard, which is a virus. And we're going to wrap up. I've gone on longer than I wanted to because it always takes longer than I thought, but I want to really, this is so important. I'm suggesting that any culture that's using this technology and being used by it is colonized by it. This is a colonized space. And we're desourced. And the great teachers, healers knew that if we're desourced, we're going to be in dysfunction, pathologies, every aspect of our life. Our word, language, is going to be broken. Word virus. Our mind and mental processing, it's going to be fragmented. Our psychic life is going to be in slices and pieces and mind bites. It's going to be broken. Which means what? That our psychic life is fragmented and fragmenting. And therefore we're going to be in pieces and not a coherent, unified flow of consciousness and peace in our deepest way of being. If our being is broken, it's a disaster in every aspect. So all of the symptoms, we're going to end on this note. And next follow-up meditation, I'd like us to say, okay, if I look at sexism in our culture, what does it look like here? What is the cause of sexism? In every case, it's going to be the motherboard is generating the symptom. That's the new symptomology of source medical ontology. Every symptom that we will name, addiction, whether to alcohol or substance abuse or opioids or whatever, what is the addiction? It's an addiction to this motherboard. If I'm having a meltdown in life of emptiness and suicidal and the lights aren't off, I'm eclipsed. We just had a great eclipse. What is the eclipse? It's the eclipse of source. That's the millennial eclipse. It wasn't just 2 minutes as the eclipse floated across the United States yesterday. It was only yesterday. And eclipse conscious, this is the eclipse. It's the eclipse of source, the eclipse of God, the eclipse of the word, the eclipse of logos, the eclipse of reason, the eclipse of Christ, the eclipse of truth, of honor, the eclipse of America, the United States, every nation, France, Germany, whatever the nation, Russia, the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Indian Revolution. They're all, what is the revolution? We want to get to, we're going to come home. We want to be free. We want to have democracy of the people here. Democracy here is not here. So when we look at political life and we look at all the breakdowns that we suffer, terrorism, ideological extremism, belief systems that are in world wars and clash of civilizations, and Holocaust and genocides and ethnic cleansing and sexism and racism and homophobia and slashing of our kids and putting them in a box and forcing them into the cattle car of the single bracket mind, that's a form of violence. I know it's hard what I'm saying to hear it and to see it. And I've struggled with this for decades, to listen to our great teachers about what is the source of violence. When we see violence around us and people are bullying and slashing and beating up on each other and in racial violence and all of the different forms of violence, could it be that we're living a violent technology? Why? Because we're slashing. This is a slasher. The single bracket is a slasher. The law of identity slashes and puts pieces, every pieces, and creates pieces so we can look at the pieces, the Lego pieces, and put them together. But that's not the same as the logos point. The logos words are together. The Lego words are broken. Just a metaphor. So I'm inviting us for the next meditation to take a look. As you take a breather, please, I've gone on too long. Any name for any pathology that you look at, political, the breakdown of the civic space. There is no dialogue, say, in the civic space of America. It's not civil. We're clashing. We're beating each other up in the streets in protests. Right? We're having showdown. Voting is a showdown. It's not we the people. The Congress is dysfunctional, a gridlock. It's not functioning. The White House is in a meltdown in terms of dialogue with the people. There is no dialogue in the place here. There is no dialogue. Dialogue is dialogos, in the logos, not monologue. We can't have dialogue here, and we don't know it. We're desperately trying to get dialogue. I mean, we use the word all the time. Dialogue here is not the same as dialogue here. The word violence here goes, when you see it in the deep medical, it's the violence of being entrapped in a colonized technology of slashing ourselves and each other and cutting us off. Most of all, the headline, this line is a huge line. It's a slashing of the source. This technology, unintentionally, but real, it slashes us from the source. We're slashing God, to use it in that term. We're slashing God. We're slashing Om. We're slashing Tao. We're slashing Allah. We're slashing Moses. We're slashing the Buddha field. We're slashing Buddha. So that's an endemic violence. So whatever the pathology, and this is what we're going to do next time, we're going to pick right up there. Please, I'm not going to go back to this. I'm just going to, because my intention was to really focus where we are now, where we're ending this 18th meditation, is where I really wanted to start up and say, okay, now let's look at addiction. Let's look at emptiness and nihilism. Let's look at sophistry and spin doctors, opinionism. Let's look at relativism. Let's look at reason that's broken. Reason in the box is not reason in the source. Single bracket reason is broken. The logics are broken. If they're taken on their own terms, they're not cut off from the logos logic, from the logos code. So wherever I look, human relations, in our family life, in our interpersonal life, am I integral? Am I at peace? Am I one with my ecology? Am I one with my lover? Can I have love? I'm looking for love, but can you find love here? Or must we tap the source to go into the intimacy of I-thou? Is love I-thou, intelligence and competence? Or can it be here when you objectify the other? If I'm objectifying my lover, is something wrong with that? It's pathological love. So whatever, every word, every psychological phenomenon, every aspect of the culture, this is the thought I'd like us to part with, and please think about it, and we'll come back at the next session 19. To just begin with that any name for any pathology that we've named in this space with our medical, psychiatry, psychology, political critique, and so forth, whatever it is, political issues, economic issues, educational issues, human relation issues, personal psychological issues, traumas of meaning, of truth, of cognition, every word is pathological in this space because a culture making, any culture in the smotherboard is infected. The culture itself is desourced. And that's the genius of our great teachers. Source medicine. If we're desourced and we're using a technology that cuts us off from being, from source, from word, from reality, if we're dislodged from reality, we're going to be suffering. And the greatest, deepest call of our great teachers and our traditions and of the source of source science is to come to source, upscript, not download. And what we've seen over and over in our journey is that any attempt of a visionary, we have a lot of visionaries who tap into this because it's right here. So a visionary is one who's translating down to us and giving us the information. They have a tap, they see this, but then they translate it down. The channelers and the visionaries and the prophets and the ones who bring the messengers who bring the messages down to us and message it to us. Text messaging here is missing the source, medicine. So the next phase of our journey is to not, okay, thank you for the visionaries who have been announcing and telling us what's there and translating it down to us. But downloading is not good enough. We've got to upscript. And we need a new kind of teachers, not preachers, but teachers who can help us cross into primary source language, which is our birthright. That's the point. It's not you have a guru who has it and you don't. Everyone is entitled and birthright as a logosapien to awaken the code of this access to source, to being, to truth. We all have direct access. We all have the code within us. And any good coach, life coach, or teacher is going to not download information and give us bullet points of how to. You can't get a how-to technique together. You need a different technology and strategy to help the listener cross into tapping her source code. We all have the source code within us. And no teacher can do it. No parent, no mother can give it to you. Everyone must find the way to say, wow, I've been living under a smotherboard and enough suffering. I can end it. I have a choice. I can rehabilitate my mind into source code. And I'm going to have to find my access code, my password. Everyone has to find her password into the source word. And that's equal opportunity. That's a democratic equal rights for all human beings, all of our kids. And we can just create conditions, educational conditions. And that's what this journey to source is intending to do, is to open up a possibility where we can see ourselves more deeply, our human condition and the depth of our suffering, and how widespread the pathologies are when we are using a culture that's infected with this motherboard. And to realize we can end the suffering, we have a choice. Our great teachers and geniuses are calling us to upscript. And how do we do that? No one can do it for us. Each of us can do that and must do that. And find our I am. When we find the I am code, we're tapping and crossing into source. So it's equal opportunity for all, and not a privilege of a few. So let's take a break. Thank you so much. Again, if you had to pause several times to handle this, I understand. What I'd like to do next time is begin number 19 immediately with let's look at the names of the symptoms that we know and recognize as pathologies in every aspect of our lives: personal, interpersonal, intercultural, interreligious, political, social, economic, psychological, psychiatric, whatever the symptoms. We're going to take them and then see how they're sourced. This would be a breakthrough. With source science, we could see why and how the single bracket technology is what's causing the symptomology of any pathology. All pathologies traced to being in this space and cut off from source and well-being. That'll be quite a feat to demonstrate, and I wanted to get deeper into that this time. So next time we'll begin with the symptomology of source medicine, medical ontology, to look at ontological disorders and rename our pathologies with the ontological language of being broken from being and cut off and fragmented. And it's from the fragmentation of this motherboard that a vast range of pathologies throughout the culture, which is using that code, can be understood as never before, and therefore we can get to the source. So if we can get to the source of this motherboard, we can heal. That's source medicine. Thank you so much for staying with us. And please join us in our next sequel, number 19, to continue the unbroken continuum of our meditative journey.